Skipster is the guest management platform used by top event teams for everything from guest lists to seating charts and online invitations. If you're looking for next-generation event software that helps deliver perfect guest experiences, head over to Skipster's website. It's Skipster, ZKIPSTER.com to try a free event.
Are you a follower?
9,
Okay, so we're gonna be
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth, here we are, our second edition of GatherGeeks in the Roaring 20s.
In our new decade.
Yeah, in our new decade.
Our guest is Pablo Povarchik. He's CEO and founder of WowPrezi. We all have this love-hate relationship with PowerPoint. I've given PowerPoint presentations. You've given them. We've all sat through them. And in this conversation, you use the phrase death by PowerPoint. What do you mean by that?
I mean, when you go into a conference and you see 1 million words on one slide, and you know that that is not just one slide, but you're going to see hundreds of those slides, and you want to kill yourself before the presentation even begins. And generally, the lack of thoughtfulness in a presentation, it's not only PowerPoint, it's the lack of presentation skills, which I think that Pablo is helping us discuss.
Well, how did you get to know him?
Well, I have become a Prezi person. I do presentations all around, and I'm able to create this one presentation that I modify all the time, and it integrates with Prezi, using Prezi
as a platform.
And what it does, it integrates video and audio and everything in one room, so you don't have to go fuss with the technology when you get to your place, because that's usually a nightmare as well when you go through rehearsals and the videos don't work and the audio doesn't work. So this puts it all in one place and makes it easier. Also allows you to up-res lower quality videos to make them higher quality. They look a little better because of the way the presentation is.
And so you came to him.
I came to him. I said, okay, I've got to learn how to do Prezi Next, which is the new version of Prezi. And he completely helped me redo my presentation. And I realized that this Prezi Next, which is the 2.0 of Prezi, really has got a lot to offer. And thought it would be helpful to have him give us some pointers on how to do presentations well.
Right. So this episode is about creating better presentations with the goal of creating better audience engagement, not boring people, and instead really delivering information that they can use in an exciting way. So take these tips for your own presentations or use them to coach speakers at your events so that they are not boring your audiences. Let's listen.
Okay, so Pablo, we're here to talk about presentations. I mean, there is a whole thing about dying from too much PowerPoint, right? People are like, they listen to PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint, right? Do you hear that all the time?
Yes. And I think that is the death of your process, of your presentation, not the death of the audience. Death by PowerPoint perceived as the death of the audience. They won't pay attention, they will get bored, I will lose my audience, and that's the death. But actually, it's the death of my message, of my process.
And so how do you go from death by PowerPoint to engagement by PowerPoint, or engagement by any presentation style? I mean, certain presentation styles have a bad name like PowerPoint, but people use it all over the world.
There is no such thing as engagement by PowerPoint unless you're a PowerPoint guru.
And what does that mean? That you know every nuance on
that
how to
you
make it
are
perfect?
an expert designing PowerPoint presentations. So if you are a speaker or if you are a salesperson, you probably are not a PowerPoint guru. We speakers are not good at making presentations. That's a fact.
The average person, in a sense,
of course,
is not good at making presentation. But the thing is, though, people think it's fun to create a PowerPoint when they first start it, because they see the whiz-bang things that they can create graphics, and usually it's terrible.
I think that people used to think that it was fun creating a PowerPoint.
Used to, yeah, in my era.
Because, I mean, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but today we are flooded with tools to create presentations in a different way.
Right.
I'm biased to WowPrezi because I'm a Prezi expert. I help companies implement Prezi, but it's much more fun to create a presentation in Prezi, navigate your way through and have your own adventure and add things and have levels and dimensions where you don't need to be an expert designer or know a lot of PowerPoint tricks, but just have fun with putting the content that you want for your presentation.
And what do you do, like, before we get into like how to create a great presentation, let's just jump through the different technologies.
Yes.
So you are an expert at Prezi, which I happen to use because I find that really engaging. Mm-hmm. There's PowerPoint.
Yes.
There's Keynote. There's Beauty. There's all these different new ones. Like, I don't even know what the names of them. I'm sure you know them all.
There are 100. Keynote, PowerPoint, Google Slides. There are a ton of small startups. The problem is, for me, or at least how I see it, is that 99% of those are using slides, are using the concept of one scene after the other instead of having one structure for that presentation that you can approach from different sides depending on how and to whom and where you are presenting.
So I use Prezi. Why is Prezi better, in your opinion, than the typical slide? I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, but what makes it more engaging? Like, what about it is so interesting?
What makes more engaging, I don't know if engaging is the right term, because Prezi is easier to understand and more memorable. What Prezi is more engaging because you understand the message better and you remember more things after the presentation.
Because of the integration of the audio and the video and the...
No, because of the spatial cognition. Spatial cognition. Because the ability of our brain to relate concepts to locations.
Right. And so, and what do you lose when you do it on a straight slide? What's the difference, though? I try to explain to us why it's better to do it that way than... What's this unique selling proposition of Prezi versus PowerPoint?
Prezi versus PowerPoint, because Prezi uses spatial cognition and a mind map structure. So many people doesn't know what is a mind map. A mind map is when you dump the contents of your mind in a canvas,
right,
an open canvas, and you use different parts of the canvas to say different things. And your brain will remember, your mind will remember that canvas because concepts are in specific positions of that canvas. With slides are like a book, disconnected from each other. You are one slide and then the next, instead of having one transition that smoothly converts into the next in one view.
So are you saying that when we talk about storytelling,
yes,
that the spatial cognition type of approach is more conducive to better storytelling? If it's done correctly.
It greatly helps with storytelling. Yes, of course.
And so you think that would be, in a larger audience, it's even more important to use those techniques, right? To allow a larger group of people to understand through spatial cognition.
Well,
or does it matter?
It doesn't matter the size. Yeah. I mean, it matters on how you deliver that presentation. It's not the same if you deliver a presentation to 3 than to 1,000. But the concept of spatial cognition is valid in every setup. It's how we... Let's do this exercise. This is a nice one. I'm asking you to imagine your kitchen at home. And now to imagine the fridge, and now to open the fridge, and imagine the milk carton. When I asked you to imagine the kitchen in a millisecond, but your mind went there, it traveled to the kitchen.
Right.
Subconsciously, you even took the train, maybe. And when I asked you to open the fridge, the kitchen disappeared from that mind's eye.
Right.
And when I ask you to picture the milk, the fridge disappears. But all that it's related by locations. It's easier for the mind, for the brain to understand and remember things when they are attached to visual or physical locations. So in a canvas where we have different parts and we can attach meaning to these different parts, it will be easier for our brain to understand, process, and remember that.
So that in a nutshell is the difference between a PowerPoint
so.
keynote
Yes.
versus a Prezi, which is a whole different approach to
Yes.
presentation.
I think that also the power of Prezi is that it facilitates storytelling because of the structure, of its non-linear structure, and because it's easy to create a presentation. You can just... The basic concept of Prezi is you have containers with information. So you create new containers and you add new information to those containers. And that's all there is about creating a Prezi.
Right.
Of course.
Right.
Your content, your pictures, your colors.
It's the kitchen concept that you talked about.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we got that. So now we're at an event. You're about to present to a big audience on a stage.
Yes.
What is the best approach to do that? You're talking about, this is the combination of storytelling and enhancing the speaker. What are the steps? Like, what do you do when you want to do a presentation and you've been asked to present and you want to go on to a stage and you want to tell the best story you can? Like, how do you do it? How do you help people do it in a sense? Because you're helping people on the Prezi side or on the PowerPoint side or whatever presentation.
I help people in two different ways. One is creating their presentation. So they tell their story to me and they give me all the materials they have. That can be an old PowerPoint, or can be other stuff like pictures, videos, or just ideas and concepts. With that, I create a visual tool that they can use to deliver their speech or tell their story. And the other side of the coin, the other face of the coin is how to actually tell a story. So the creation of the presentation and standing on the stage and actually being able to connect and deliver that presentation by telling a story. And I think that the cohesive element on all that is your intimate relationship with your own story, with the story that you are telling. You cannot fake it. I mean, you can, and you may have some results, but not the same.
Tell us, there's certain types of stories that people tell.
Yes.
Why don't you go through some of those? Because that's the key to, and once you figure out your goal of what your story is about, what you want to accomplish, the technique of this type of storytelling then becomes more important. And so what are those story types that you think people should know about if they're listening to this podcast?
There are story types and story structures or frameworks. Story types. There are 7 story archetypes that are used in business and in every setup. And it's overcoming the monster, rags to riches. We could talk about each of them, but
just the general.
Yes, the quest, voyage and return. So I undertake a voyage and I return, change, different comedy, tragedy, and rebirth. However, all those type of stories can all of them can be structured in a 3-step story, where you start with the struggle, a problem, difficulty, a situation, and then you undertake a journey, an adventure, a quest to solve that situation. And the final step, when you come out of that journey or adventure, change yourself and with the solution to that struggle. So that's the framework to tell any of the 7 type of stories. This is the simplest. There are 5 steps frameworks instead of 3. There is the hero's journey. There are different types. I suggest if this is a first time or a first approach, using the hero's journey with a 3-step story, which is the simplest and the most effective. Is the one that always works. The hero's journey is basically the adventure of our hero. Your hero is each of your audience or guest. In an investor presentation, your hero is your investor. In a sales presentation, your hero is your prospect. And they face a struggle. They face different types of struggles. One is their own position, their own story. Why are they there at that particular time? The story that brings them to look for a solution. So what's my story? What's the story that the company I work for? What's your story? All those stories combined. And the framework is the struggle, the problem to solve, the adventure, the quest for a solution, and finally reaching that solution. We can make that story more or less dramatic depending on the kind of situation or the audience.
Right.
But the structure is that I have a problem, you have a problem. We will undertake this adventure to solve or to dissolve that problem, and I come out
the winner or whatever.
Yes,
So
the
whoever
winner or
person-
whatever.
Building a memorable experience for your guest means planning every detail right. Skipster is the guest management platform designed to help you create the perfect experience, from impressive online invitations to seamless check-in at the door. Get started at Skipster, spelled ZKIPSTER.com, for a free test event.
Okay, so we got the story type, we got everything else. What next for the person that's giving this presentation? When they talk to you, for example,
Yes.
and you're enhancing this presentation, are you helping them with the script as well, or you're just helping them with the enhancement to the story that they wrote? Or are you writing the story? You're helping them write the whole
Sometimes I write the whole story, usually based on their story.
Right.
No, that didn't come out well. I don't write the story. I help them articulate, verbalize the story, also visually.
Right. And then, so then visually, there's some rules that you have about visuals.
I think that a few tips that are super important is to not, people cannot read and listen at the same time. So if it's a presentation that will be delivered by a speaker, then the words of the speaker should be enough. And the visuals of the presentation itself, should support that. For example, with just a few words that represent what the speaker is saying, is telling. Because if we put a lot of text, we crash. Yeah. Our brain crashes because we cannot pay attention to what you are saying and be reading on the screen at the same time. That's I think one of the most important and the most frequent mistake that I see on people that make their own presentation. Your audience cannot read and listen at the same time. So if it's a presentation that they will self-serve, that you will send and they will watch by themselves, you need a lot of text on screen. But if you are talking, no text, or just some keywords
that help them to remember.
Keywords. Yeah. That's the key. Yeah. Keywords.
Right. And how about the pictures and things like that? Or, I mean, do you think of it the same way? You just sort of use them as metaphors for simple concepts.
I like the concept of keeping things simple. Pictures need to be very well chosen or taken for the occasion.
Right.
Because it's very difficult to match a picture that you find on the internet to that specific message that you want to say, unless you get lucky or you spend hours searching. Do not try to convey more than 3 ideas or concepts on the same screen. This is a very well-known framework. Use a 3x3 concept where you use 3 words, 3 concepts on screen, and you use a group of 3 topics that you want to talk about. So your top, unless you know what you are doing, your top is 3x3. 3 concepts, 3 topics, 3 words on screen, 3 elements of communication. When it comes to the visual element, most of the time, the presentations are distracting. We think that by using more colors, more elements, more animations, more effects in our presentation, we will make the presentation more engaging.
But
True. The problem is you want them engaged with the presentation or with your message. What's your goal? Your audience paying attention to what you are saying and to the message that you want to convey, or the flashy things that they see on screen.
the flashy things are kind of like an amateur lesson that it's an amateur.
Yes.
So
I did that too.
Yeah, so we all, oh my God, this is so cool. Let's change the transitions a million ways. That's like the worst thing you can do.
Yes, because they are distracting people from you.
Right. And then you also mentioned how that color makes a difference too, that you can create a mood and
a lot of
emotion.
Difference.
Tell us sort of the primer.
Just a
color.
few. Orange, a lot of energy. Red, angry, aggressive. Blue, authoritative. Something that knows what they are talking about.
Right.
Pantone kind of colors, those pastel colors, use them for a mellow effect or just to not call the attention to that object. Use black only for premium, high-end kind of stuff. Use white to let people wander. Use white to create space. Everything that I just said about colors is void, is null, because it really depends on the context.
Yeah, totally. But you talk about green. You're not a big fan of green.
This is just personal experience. I haven't found much on the topic, but green distracts people because for at least 20 years now, green is associated with environment, with conflict, with something that we are not comfortable with. Unless the green is granted, of course. My brand is green, but I use it just as details.
Right. What about when you do presentations? I know that this is another one that it depends, but how long should a presentation be before someone gets tired? Like, we talk about TED Talks and they're like 20 minutes. Like when you see when you have an hour speaker, is that like overkill today?
Yes. Yes, it is. We reach to conclusions in milliseconds today. We didn't used to do that. We used to consume a lot of information before making an opinion about something or deciding to keep going with something. I think that longer presentations are good for conversational settings where the presentation is actually a conversation, it's an exchange in a plain conversation or just a small exchange between the speaker and the audience. One-to-many presentations, deliveries should not go over the 20 minutes at all.
Okay.
Unless, again, the situation grants it.
So let's talk about the other elements of music and video.
Yes.
How does that sort of integrate now into a video? Do you show, in my presentation, I show a lot of videos.
Well. You do it very, very well.
Because it demonstrates things that I can't, it brings other people into the presentation.
You do it very well because you add the video with the specific scope, with the specific goal in mind, which brings us back to the goals. When you add the video to be flashy or to create engagement without a clear idea why, you are just distracting people. But for example, in your case, you use the video to add value. You shut up, run the video, and then talk about that.
Right.
Okay? So you are having 10 speakers in one presentation, which is your idea, and you do that great. Audio, just for the intro and outro. I mean, you are a speaker. You don't need any kind of music or background, unless, for example, you are creating a video. So if you are creating a video for promoting, but that's a different stuff. You don't want any kind of background music unless you are creating an effect, unless you are telling a multimedia story. But that's not the case. It's not a presentation. It's telling a story.
How has the rise of Instagram and the new ways that people are presenting online impacted the presentation? Like sometimes you see all this stuff in an Instagram with pictures on top of pictures, and it's sort of like makes it so confusing sometimes. But the style has been mimic now in presentations. Do you endorse that?
I disagree. No.
What do you think? You think it's not?
I think
important?
that it's distracting.
Yeah.
That it takes you farther from your goal instead of getting you closer to your stakeholders, audience, public. I think that the incidence of social media technology and how we are tightly connected to each other is what made the difference on how we present today. Before 10, 15, 20 years ago, slides-based presentation was great. You were the holder of the information. Your audience were the passive audience, and they were ready to accept your word for it. But today it's not like that anymore, because when I'm standing in front of my audience, they have asked to their friends about me. They already saw other of my talks. They have even maybe more information than I have about myself.
Yeah, especially with augmented reality coming out.
Of course, and all the technologies that are coming on to help with that. So presentations today need to be dynamic, to the point, and yes, very short, very concise. And if you really need to present, yes, do present, and then have a conversation with your audience. Unless you have 1,000 people, that's a different situation.
Okay, as we sort of wrap up a little bit, though, there's one thing I've learned is that I thought it was fun to do presentations, so I liked doing it. But then I realized I wasn't that great at it. That I needed to have help outside. Mm-hmm. So how do people know to find people like you to help them? Because it looks like it's easy to do, but then people don't realize how bad their presentations are. How do people find you, and why should they not depend on their own sense of aesthetics for presentations because it's fun, and realize that they need outside pros, just like you need a good designer to design a product, or you need a good designer. That design of a presentation is absolutely critical to make it more understandable and connect more with the audience. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense a lot. My case is very particular because I'm a presentations designer with a real interest in storytelling.
People need to know that there are people that design presentations that are out there.
Yes.
And that it's not something, they don't even know that it exists because it looks so easy to do it in a template.
Yeah.
But it needs an outside designer to help them make them better.
But I don't know how to find me or how to find, because
I looked you up.
Yes, you looked me up, but you knew Prezi beforehand.
Yeah.
The Prezi Expert, it's a new concept because there are graphic designers everywhere that you can give them your PowerPoint and we'll create your presentation and we design your PowerPoint. But not necessarily they have the ability to help you convey the message in a way that is impactful and that brings you closer to your goals.
See, that's the biggest problem with events today that I see.
Yes.
Is that people get on these stages, people don't even question them on what they're going to present, and they present this crappy stuff, and they're bringing down the value of events.
Yes.
Because the content is so poorly done, and people don't give, first high quality thinking to that. They want to make sure the logistics of the event are done, but not the learning and the presentations. And the ones that do it right are the ones that concentrate on the presentations and the content of the speakers, in my opinion. And so you are a tool for that, that people don't necessarily realize that they need in many cases.
I am a speaker's superpower. I like to say it that way because I can put together all the different aspects of a great presentation and not just the design or just the storytelling part. And
you just answered the question of why people need you.
Yes,
okay,
it's a very specific skill set. You need to know how to put the elements of design in the presentation, how to structure the presentation, how to tell the story, how to structure the message from a visual point of view, but also from an emotional and engaging and being persuasive kind of way.
What did you call the speaker's
Superpower.
Superpower. The
Yes,
speaker's superpower.
I'm the speaker's superpower.
So I think we just came up with the title of this episode.
Okay, I like that very much.
Okay, so Pablo, how can people get in touch with you, Pablo? What's your email address? And
My email address is spablo, which is SPABLO at WowPrezi.com. That's
WowPrezi, right?
Prezi.
You call it
with a Z.
Prezi.
Well, because that's I pronounce it in Italian. So it's Prezi.
Okay.
But Prezi. So my email address is spablo, SPABLO at WOWPREZ, like zebra, I.com.
Great.
And you can also find me on LinkedIn or Twitter as Pablo Povarchik or WowPrezi.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Pablo.
Thank you, David, for having me here.
And we're back. David, thanks for that. I'm curious how your best practices have changed. If you have maybe a quick list of do's and don'ts for presentations.
The most important thing I've learned is that I'm not the best designer in the world, even though when everyone does their own PowerPoints, their own presentations, they think they're so wonderful. So I actually asked for help, and I got help from Pablo and his team to help me do it. And I've learned that you have to kind of be simple with everything that you do and simplify, and make it so that people understand the arc of the story. It's just like telling a story, and you have to really think about it. I change it a lot. I change it up a lot because I try to add things in at the last minute. So sometimes the new stuff doesn't look as good as the stuff that's already been pre-planned. But it is definitely the art of doing a good presentation is different for different things. Like I try to do presentations that are very information heavy so people get a sense of it. I'm not really just telling a story alone, but I'm telling a story of an industry. And I'm also bringing people with me to speak on behalf of what they are telling me in the flesh too. So it's kind of like, it's like a man on the street type of thing too.
So what do you think about people in the audience who are lifting up their cell phones to take pictures of individual slides? Like, do you see that as there's so much information, they want to make sure they save it for later, they don't want to take notes, or is it kind of taking them out of the moment?
Oh no.
What do you think?
I'm a total believer in that is the way you transfer information. So half the time what I do when I go to a presentation is I'm taking pictures, and we use Slack. So I'm slacking it to the person right from the presentation so I don't have to forget what I've seen. And I say, have we done this? Are we thinking about this? Are we doing this? And so I use the video, I use the audio, the photographs and the Slack and the visual presentations all at once to be in the moment to translate the information back to our team.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's all make New Year's resolutions then to deliver better presentations in 2020.
It always can get better no matter what you do. So Beth, what else is going on in BizBash world?
Well, it's Hollywood Awards season officially,
yeah.
Which for our audience means looking at the design and production of the various industry parties and seeing what we can adapt for our own events, right? You know, not to mention the ceremonies themselves. We kicked things off last week with our comprehensive coverage of the Golden Globes, and there's more to come. Claire Hoffman, who our listeners know as our editorial liaison on the podcast, she is on the ground. And so if you want to see real-time photos, follow us on Instagram at BizBash. So much there.
And also, I believe that because it's such a global event, that it has an impact, what you said earlier, in events all around the world, no matter what kind of event you're doing, because they're setting the tone and they're also able to sort of break new ground, I guess.
Right, with some nice budgets as well.
Some nice budgets that you can sort of fabricate in your own ways if you can.
Or
steal their idea. Right. It's aspirational. So, that's fantastic. And before we end our podcast, we always like to thank the people that worked on it. Claire Hoffman, who is our editorial liaison, as you just have heard, who's wonderful. Rebecca Pappas, who gets it to you and through all the different various channels. And Dave Nelson, who is our producer. So thank you. And what do we say, Beth?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.